By the way, I've noticed that the transcript is a big transcript for the entire session. The recordings are per module. So when you want to look at the recordings later, you will see that I cut it up into each chunk or each recording is a separate, what is it, MP4 file or something like that. So welcome to the training. Let me open the actual slide that I want to discuss. Managing payments is the next module. Today, I want to do 3 modules. If we go through them fast, I'm giving you time back. My experience is that doing more than 3 modules per day confuses people. So the effectiveness of the training degrades a lot. So I'm going to do 3 modules per day, regardless of the time it takes me, just because of the experience that I've had in previous trainings. Okay, the recording is running, so now is still the time to run away if you don't want to be in the recording. Simple as that. But also realize that whatever you type, whatever you say, will be recorded as of now. I want to do it the same way as last Monday. If you have questions, I'm giving you time for questions along the way. After each, I would say, part of the module that has a logical end. So write down your questions until that moment, making life a little bit easier for us all, because the group is fairly large again today. So managing payments is the topic at hand. What does it mean? We're going again, and I mentioned that last Monday, I think, as well. First, we're always talking about the concepts. So what is a payment? Where do I find payments in the process? What definitions do we have for it? Then we're going to look at the workspace, and we're going to look at the process behind the payments, what are steps to be taken, etc., etc. It might be that this is not a really relevant scenario for all of you, because I know there are partners that do a how would I say that do a come on, help me, that do work according to Claro Invoice. But at least it's good to know that those documents are there, what information is in those documents, etc., etc. So first, let's talk about the concepts. And the first thing to look at is, of course, where are we in the whole process of sales? And again, we have this slide. This one is not animated, so it doesn't go through from order process to payment process. We just have the payment process highlighted in this case. We don't want to have that many animated slides. I don't like that. But this is where we are. On Monday, we discussed, we ended, let's say, the first module, the overview, with this slide. After that, we looked into how to create a service plan. Then we went into the order process. And of course, the next step in this case is we process a payment. Like I said before, the system is set up in such a way that we do not want to provision until we have the money. Even if we process the payments outside of the platform, we still want that platform to know about the fact that, hey, yeah, there is some kind of payment. Don't worry about it. You can start provisioning. That's basically the idea. Could we have done it another way? Yes, of course we could have. We could have taken every single order flow and taken that payment process out of it, created new order flows, etc., etc. The downside of that is that if at some point a company that's using our platform decides that, oh, wait a second, maybe it is a good idea to also have the availability of a PayPal plugin or of a Stripe credit card plugin, we have to redo those order flows. So what we have decided to do is we are going to just fake that payment. What we have set up is I would almost say a dummy payment method that tells the order flow, yeah, the money is in. And then, of course, at the end of the month or whenever you do that, using the export file, you import it into your real payment system, you charge the customer, and work according to that process. That is how that payment process works. That's why it's always there. There's always a payment, whether you use Stripe, whether you use PayPal, whether you use an external payment system as well. So looking at that payment process, of course, the first thing we want to look at is payment documents, because payments are a concept. And what we have is different types of payment documents or financial documents, AR documents, account receivable documents, we call them in the platform. And what is it? It is basically an object that holds the payment detail data. So what is there? You will see things like a payment amount. What was the method used? In most cases, it might be Claro invoice, or it will be Stripe, or it will be PayPal, whatever. We see the dates that the document is generated, when the payment was received, and the processing details. And with processing details, I mean actually, did we try once? Did we have to try 3 times? Was the money captured in one go, yes or no? If that money is in, and we call it the money is captured, and you will see that in the platform as well, that payment document is used to pay the invoice document eventually. So in a sales order, let me go back here. In a sales order, we first do the payment, and then after provisioning, we generate the invoice, right? That is what we discussed yesterday in that whole flow. The thing is that we capture the money first. That means that payment stays open because customer paid you and you did not deliver anything yet. Eventually, provisioning happens, and then the invoice is generated at this level. So the invoice is generated here. At that moment, we know that we have done what the customer paid for. What we call apply those 2 documents, the payment and the invoice, against each other, and that closes the documents if both amounts have gone to 0. So we have a payment that has an invoice against it, and we have an invoice that has a payment against it. And in general, those 2 amounts, the payment and the invoice, will be the same because I paid for that part that I just needed, meaning that specific service. The invoice is for that same service, so these amounts are the same, meaning that eventually those 2 amounts will zero each other out when it comes to bookkeeping. And when a financial document, an AR document, goes to 0, we close it. So what type or what fields are there in the payment document? Well, we've got the customer information there, of course. Who was this object for? Is it, whether it's an invoice, whether it's a payment, whether it's a debit memo, credit memo, all that information, of course, needs to be stored in that payment document. The document date is an obvious one, and the due date. And the due date is mostly for invoices and debit memos. What is the due date? The last date when the document needs to be paid. So when would, and most of the time this due date is relevant for those recurring payments. We generate that recurring payment invoice for the customer, and now he has some time to pay that bill. He does not need to do it immediately. In most cases, if there is that fake invoice payment method, the system will automatically apply a payment there. If we have a credit card on file, for that customer for recurring payments, the system will automatically pick that credit card and charge that card for the amount to be paid the moment that invoice is generated. So in most cases, the due date is never reached. When will the due date be reached? If the customer does not have a stored credit card, so the customer actively needs to approve that payment or needs to actually make that payment manually. Then the due dates might be reached and you go into things like grace periods, hold periods, things that we will talk about later. The status of the payment. Is it an open payment? Is it a new payment? Is it a failed payment? Is it a closed payment or invoice? The same goes for invoices. And then we are talking about what the total of that payment was, what the tax was on that payment document. And when I'm talking about payment document, we're not just talking, and I cannot emphasize that enough, we're not just talking about the payment. We're talking about invoices, we're talking about debit memos, credit memos, all those financial documents. We call them payment documents or accounts receivable documents, AR documents. And the last thing that we have there is also the balance of that payment. Why would that be interesting? Well, a document, a payment, might not fit the actual invoice. Let's say a credit memo. We have given the customer a credit memo last month, and we want to first apply that credit memo. And he received the credit memo for $10, and he has an invoice of 100. When we apply that credit memo to that payment, to that invoice, of course, the credit memo's balance will go to zero. That's fairly logical because we consume that entire $10 of credit. That means that the balance of the invoice is now 90. The total was 100, but since we apply $10 to it, the balance goes down 10, and the customer now needs to create a payment of at least $90. In most cases, he will just pay $90, meaning that there is a payment and a credit memo together 100 against an invoice of 100, meaning that all balances of those three documents go to zero. The moment a balance goes to zero, we close that document. Making it easier to filter what open payments do I have, or actually what open financial documents do I still have. That's something to see. Do we have payments open? That means that something went wrong with provisioning. Let me check that. What invoices do I still have open? Do we need to start putting customers on a credit hold? Things like that are important when we're talking about the balance and the status of a document. So these two are, I wouldn't say one-on-one the same, but these two are related. Because when the balance goes to zero, the status is closed. If the balance is not zero, the status can be still open or new or whatever. We've got payment documents, but we also have payment methods. What is a payment method? Well, a payment method is the option that we give the customer to pay for the service. Could be Visa credit card, could be PayPal, could be Claro invoice. Those kind of things. Thing is that you as a reseller and provider, but let's talk about reseller statuses because that's on your platforms what you all are, opcos of or resellers. You decide what you accept. It's just like when you go into a store or into a restaurant, some of them accept Visa cards, others accept MasterCard only. So it's up to you where you have your contracts, what you want to accept for your customers. The customer cannot just choose anything. They have to follow what you are offering. Visa, PayPal, Claro invoice, those kind of things. Like I said, a customer needs to use an available payment method. So there is a pull down menu and you figure out what you want, what you need. And customers can save payment method details for future payments, whether that's automatic or manual, right? When would you have a manual payment? If you buy something new. You don't need to feed your credit card anymore, because with the current payment providers we have, you feed it once, they store it, they give a token back to the CloudBlue platform, and that token can be used to authorize and authenticate this specific user to use that specific card for his purchases on our platform. Of course, into that process, the payment provider will have to make sure that credit cards are not expiring anymore. We get a notification about it, so we can also tell the customer, but it is important to realize that we don't store credit cards anymore. We used to do that. We were fully payment card industry data storage standard compliant, PCI DSS, but we decided that the liability is too high for not only us, but also for you as a platform owner, because we are in the business of selling stuff. We are not in the business in protecting credit cards. So liability when we store those cards would be too high. What we have now is we have integration with all parties, or most of the parties that do that as a business. Stripe does that as a business. PayPal does that as a business, which means that their focus is not only to handle those payments, but also to be protective of their infrastructure and the cards that are stored there. So that's why we went that way. But that does not mean that since we don't store it anymore, the customer has to go back into the platform every time and make every monthly payment that is needed. It is still the case that we get a token back, and that token can only be used with our with the authentication of the respective platform using the credentials of, let's say, the contract owner with that payment provider, which means that a recurring payment has to go to your account. Nobody can just take out that token and say, hey, using this token, I want $50. So what are we talking about? To use services, the customer should pay for them. The payment system defines how customers pay and what data they need to provide for payment processing. When paying, customers select a payment method like Visa or Stripe, which is a single association between a payment system and a payment gateway. The payment system is an external system from a bank. So that is Stripe, that is Visa, that is MasterCard, that is PayPal. The payment system defines how customers pay for services and what data is needed. The payment gateway is actually the plugin that lives on the CloudBlue Commerce system and that sets up a secure connection between the payment system and the CloudBlue Commerce environment. Of course, this all is provided that you actually communicate with a payment provider or a payment system of a payment provider. When you're using Claro Invoice, there is no communication. Like I said, the system just makes up a payment, tells the process, hey, the customer paid, and nothing happens. Nothing is communicated. Everything happens internally. But if you want to do PayPal, if you want to do Stripe, credit card, etc., you need a payment gateway that supports those cards. That means that if you want to do Visa, you have to find a payment provider that supports Visa. You need to find, and they need to have a payment system that we can reach, and there needs to be a payment gateway, that supports those API methods. And then, of course, the payment method is the actual option chosen by the customer to pay for a service or product. It's that simple. Payment method is that, that specific card that we store the token for. Or the payment method is PayPal, where we redirect that customer to the PayPal website where he authorizes the payment. So we are not sitting in between PayPal and the customer. The moment the customer tells the platform that he wants to use PayPal, we redirect him or her to the PayPal site with the details where he authorizes the payment. We get feedback from PayPal through the backend, and he is reverted back to the to our website or to the CloudBlue platform that he has paid, and we are now provisioning. So that's how the system works. In this case, our payment system, or the types of payment systems that we support, because we do support a lot, we do not support everything though. So what are the types that we support? For one-time payments, we support both external payment side as a modal form. Modal form means we pop up a screen, a window. It is embedded in the site of CloudBlue. That means in the background, they still see the CloudBlue website. It's a window that pops up. It's actually a form that pops up from the portal where they fill out their details. We encrypt it and send it to the payment system, the data. So we gather the information and send it. The other one is the external payment side is a redirect. So this is where we actually send that customer outside of CloudBlue, where he handles the payment, and eventually they are sent back by that payment provider. Two ways, and the choice that is made here is made by the payment provider. We cannot steer that. Recently, I've been involved in creating a custom payment plugin for a partner, and they were choosing a payment provider that had a redirect, so external payment side for credit card, but they had a modal form for wallet payments. So in that case, we have to build a plugin that supports both based on the choice they make when they create that payment. Do I want to use credit card? Okay, boom, let's redirect you to that payment provider. Hey, I want to use my wallet application. In that case, we have to pop up a modal form for them. And of course, all this has to be described by that payment provider. If you want to use payment systems that we don't have plugins for, we can always try to build them. The thing is that we are, of course, relying on APIs of that payment provider to be available. But we can build whatever needed, provided that the payment system supports that. But these are only one-time payments. So that is the initial sales order, for instance. If we want to do recurring payments, we need to have some kind of information to validate that we can just pay that. Otherwise, we have to ask the customer to go into the commerce platform, to log into his customer control panel and make payments in a manual way. So what we have there is we support tokenized mode, and most of these support some kind of tokenization. Most, not all, which means that those payment items are only for one-time payment, meaning that if I use that for my sales order, I also have to always go back in for each recurring payment that I need to make into the control panel and make the payment in a manual way. The risk of that, probably everybody can imagine. The risk of that means that payments might fail, or might be forgotten, or the person needing to do that payment, having the authority to do that, is on vacation. So the payment sits there, or the request for payment sits there for a month. Customer times out, and customer goes on credit hold or whatever. So it is quite a risk. Tokenized mode, if you look for payment systems, make sure they support some kind of tokenization. And this one used to be there, and you might still see some older platforms, you might see some credit cards that are stored. But to be honest, we are not doing that anymore. We don't support it for new versions of the platform. We don't switch it on for new labels we onboard, because of that liability that I talked about earlier. We were certified for that, but we decided that it's not that hard to maintain that certification. That's not the problem. It's the liability. It's the liability of doing this that we did not like. So those are the concepts. Let me pull up Teams and ask you, what questions do you have? And let's do it as Monday. If you don't have questions, give me a thumbs up, please. Super.
Check the chat, please. I'm writing my question in the chat now.
Perfect. Be aware that I don't see the chat, so if you want me to check the chat, indeed mention it. There will not be labs. I will, however, share the slide decks together with the videos.
Okay.
Yeah, the thing is that the question is, do we still have dummy payment gateway in version 21? My understanding is that only resource dummy gateway will be end of life. That's a tricky question, because we have a strict answer, which means that there is no dummy payment gateway anymore. However, and that might answer your question better, we do have a demo payment gateway that functions just like the dummy one. I don't know why they said dummy isn't there anymore, but demo is. Why they took out that scenario. But there is still a way of doing that story of the Claro invoice. Only it's not with dummy, it's with demo.
But then I'll have to compute the payments that I had, right? Because if I have a payment that, like a payment system that based upon dummy gateway, then I'll have to
it might be that you have to reconfigure. Yeah, it might be that you have to reconfigure.
Yeah, that one was not in our radar. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. And the last one, I can still use the payment SDK to create new credit card payment integration. Absolutely. We have our payment SDK. Let me pull it up quickly. It's still there. Let me go to the documentation side, where we have this one, and looking at, hey, why don't you show that? Oh, okay. Platform SDK, no, plugins SDK. Here we have it. There is a payment plugin SDK that is still there, just like the domain and fraud screening plugins. They're all still available. With the API specifications there, data models, description of methods, etc., etc. Does that answer your question, Ana Paula?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay. More questions? If not, let's continue. Let's continue. So the next step to look at is the workspace. And the workspace, we're talking about money. So where do we go? We log into the system, classic panel, we go to billing, because that's where money is. Come on. And I want to do this in a live demonstration, but why don't I see my browser? Okay, now I see it. There we go. Let me log in again. Let me use this platform. Okay. Why does it not allow me this? There we go. So this is the demo. That's the one I need. Here we are. So I log in, go to operation, log into operations, go to billing. And we've got our documents. Payment documents, invoices, credit memos, debit memos, refunds, everything is found under that same header called documents. Again, we have, let me pull up the slide deck quickly. Here we are under finance. We've got different tabs where payments is one, invoices is a second one. There is a tab with open documents, as you see. So you don't need to filter on all documents that you want to see everything that's open. We created that for you because we know that that is a very important thing. And we've got the details pane. And of course, if you click a document, you go into the, come on, why does it not show me that? Okay, you go into the details of that document. I want to look at this from a live perspective. So let me go into this one and let's take the all documents, use a open credit memo. Here we have it. We see that the total is this, the balance is another. So I'm going into this document. The details that we see here is which customer are we talking about? When was this document created? The 11th of March. So that's fairly recent. We see, since this is a credit memo, not a debit memo or an invoice, there is no due date. If this were an invoice that we created a correction on, let's say the customer was able to prove that his usage on Azure was less than we charged him for, we can create a correction. You will see which invoice was corrected there. The status here, if you see there is a little question mark, it tells you what is there. The invoice is not fully paid. In this case, it's a credit memo. So you see that the help that you get is a very generic one. We see the total, we see the tax total, and we see the balance. In this case, since the total and the balance are the same, it means that no invoices have been generated against this specific credit memo. There is a description as well. Credit memo for 1,000,001. That 1,000,001 is, of course, the same as this 1,000,001. And we even see the creation time. It's one item with everything in it. What can I see more is I can see documents that have been applied to this. So if this customer, 1,000,001, would have, let's say, open invoices, I can apply them to this credit memo, meaning that this customer does not need to pay that invoice because we gave him that much credit. You can do that here. We can see all the notifications that went out. If we create a credit memo, we can send a notification to the customer to, let's say, to tell him or to confirm that we created that credit memo. The system does that automatically if you want to. If you want to, this is a configuration. There is no service usage attached here. If we have notes because the customer called about this, we can add a note there, and we can see for which orders this credit memo was created. If we, for instance, take a payment, this one, we see that the balance in this case is 0. So everything has been used. Customer paid $1, and probably there's an invoice applied to it of $1. Here we have it. It's applied, and we have both have an amount of $1. So the balance goes to 0, which means that both documents are closed. You see the processing status here, that the money was captured. In this case, the fraud screening did not work, was not involved. And I can see if these are credit cards, I can see e-transactions here. So if there is a dispute with the owner of a credit card, you can see the timestamp, the e-transaction code that we receive from the payment provider to prove that, hey, this is when it was applied. Not sure how this could have been done with a stolen card or whatever, but this is the proof that we received the money at that and that moment, so they can go into their logs what was wrong. Notifications, again, payment has been received. Again, we can send out those notifications if we want to. Again, the notes, if there is a dispute about it, you can add a note to a payment, put in the text. I can even attach files or what is it? Images. Please send me a screenshot of your payment that was not correct. You put in all that information and add that note to the payment. And here's the payment log. Again, we have a flow. This is a payment order. A payment order is fairly short, but the story of yesterday still goes. It's an order, so it needs to be eventually in the completed status. You can see all that. If we go into that invoice, and that's the fun part, you can click through. Now we're looking at the invoice related to it. There is a reseller plan that the customer paid for $1, symbolic, where the total is 1, the tax was 0, the balance after application is 0. We see the description. Again, we see the application, and now we can run around in circles. We see the notification log that the invoice was sent to the customer. Again, the note story. In this case, there are 2 extra parameters that we needed to store to make sure that this reseller works. So there are 2 notes in there. And I see for which order this invoice has been generated. So all the information is visible. And if I go back to my list of items, you will see that if you check the balance column, this one, you will see that all closed documents have a balance of 0. Everything that is non-zero is still open. And in this case, it's all credit memos. Somebody decided that credit memos are a way to make things work. Now let's look at the color. Look at the color. We have a -1 and we've got a 1. The totals and balances of these numbers relate to who sees it. What does that mean? Well, if a customer makes a payment, like in this line, if a customer makes a payment of $1, it means that I, as a seller, need to provide him services for that same amount. So basically, I am in debt with that customer. That is why that number is $1 and is red and is negative. I owe him services for that amount. And of course, the moment I deliver that, that is my positive number. I did this. I gave him that amount. So that's why the red numbers in the classic panel are like this. If we look at that customer, the numbers will be different. His payment will be black and his invoice will be red. So the system will, I would almost say, manipulate the negatives and the positives depending on who is looking at that screen, at that number. So we have our amounts, we've got the tabs that I walked through, we've got the actual information, and of course, an important one as well is the status. This one needs to be closed eventually. Here we see that the processing details is new, so somebody needs to kick off this payment first. If needed. So it tells me that I have to do a demo. I already did that. So what questions do you have so far? Let me check the chat. Nothing there.
We're good.
Always good, always good. All right.
We are nice. We are good.
Let's continue then. The payment process. So what is the payment process? And the payment process is not, hey, we feed a card and the system goes to the credit card company and we get the information back. Of course, how do we configure this? What are the steps needed to be taken? Well, the first thing we do is we need to, I would almost say, first install and then configure the payment gateway. Payment gateway is something that, of course, needs to be authenticating to the payment provider. The payment provider needs to know, let's say, in which account to which account to store that money, to process that money into. So we need authentication in there, authorization in there, security on top of that for data traffic, et cetera, et cetera. So configure the payment gateway. That's the first step. Install plugin, put in credentials, et cetera, et cetera. Then we configure the payment system. The payment system could be PayPal, could be Stripe. So for what currencies do you support this payment system? Because it might be that for one currency you want to do credit card, Visa. For other currencies in a different level of your environment, you want to use MasterCard, et cetera, et cetera. That is what you configure in the payment system. Maybe you want to do a surcharge for using credit card, because in most cases, the credit card payments cost you something as a seller. And if you want to charge the customer that amount, you can do that. You can configure the payment system to add that surcharge to the customer's invoice. Hey, you can do Claro invoice. It won't cost you anything because that's our standard setup. However, if you don't want that and you're going to use credit card, you pay our cost for you. It could be a percentage of each purchase. It could be a fixed amount, depending, of course, on your cost towards the payment provider. And the next step is to configure the payment method. Stripe supports multiple card types. Maybe you don't want that. Maybe you just want MasterCard. Okay. Stripe is the payment system, but we on Stripe only support MasterCard. Okay. We can configure that. Again, also for which currency. And then we allow it for customers. And the last thing, and to be honest, this is not so much you as a seller, that is the customer. The customer might add that payment method to the system. Of course, if it's a generic payment method like Claro invoice, you can do it in a generic way. This is the default payment method for all customers. However, it's not always a generic one. Sometimes it is a more specific one where the customer has to feed his card and get the token back. In that case, of course, the customer needs to do it. We've got a couple of statuses that are important. Actually, the three key ones. Hold. The initial status of a payment document is hold, which means money was not yet received. It's actually some kind of draft of the payment or a refund. That means that when we create it, the balance and we put it on hold, the amount is still the amount that we're going to request from the payment provider, but the balance is still zero because we did not receive anything. Actually, it would be something like the system creates a document with a total amount of 10, but it's not requiring the customer to pay that, so the balance is zero for that customer. When would a document go to open? Well, the moment a financial document is released, that is part of that payment order. When would you want to do that? For instance, we create the payment, but we're going to verify first if this is a fraudulent payment or not. So we create it in hold. We do fraud screening at this point. So this is where fraud screening happens. And the moment we decide that this is a safe payment, we open it and start processing. That is a little bit how the difference sits between hold and open. If you don't do fraud screening, of course, it will be an instantaneous action. We created it, it's on hold, boom, we open it and start processing it and start talking to the payment provider and collecting the money. And the last one, and that's of course, again, the desired one for all payments, invoices, etc., they're closed. When is it closed again? It's going to be closed when the balance is zero. Which means that for a payment, there is an invoice or a debit memo applied. That's exactly the same. That zeros each out. For an invoice, it's of course a credit memo or a payment that zeros out that invoice. It could be combinations of the two. But the key thing is, when is a document closed? When the balance goes to zero, which means that there are two applied documents. And let me demonstrate that quickly. We've got this one, the $1 payment and the $1 invoice. Both balances are zero. Why? Because we have applied the invoice to the payment of the same amount. However, one of the things I can do is I can reverse an application. If I go to my item now, you see that the balance is $1 and the document is open again. Why is that? Because I've broken that application, meaning that the payment is there, the invoice is there, but they're standalone now. They don't zero each other out. If you look at the balance of this customer, you will see that it's still zero because we've got a positive balance of $1, we've got a negative balance of $1. The customer itself has a balance of zero. The problem is that his payment, or actually his invoice now, is not paid. So even if this situation persists, this customer could go into credit hold even though he has made that payment. Why? Because I messed up. I reverted that application. And the silly thing is, I can revert the application from the payment, but I cannot reapply it. So I'm going to go to the invoice, and here I can apply the new payment. I could also use the credit memo if I want to. but I can also use the payment. And I'm going to be funny, and I'm going to use the credit memo in this case. So the application amount is $1. That means that the invoice is now closed, but we still have a payment open of $1. And you see that the balance of the credit memo has gone down $1. And since it's still not zero, I can do a lot of those $1 things before I zero out $2,760. But this is how you can play around with those documents. Let's fix it again, because this is a demonstration platform that I want to fix or don't want to break. Apply document. I want to apply the payment again. And now we have the original state again. So those are the payment statuses and how they close and open. There is more to say about it. What is there more to say? Well, we can void a payment. Why would I want to do that? Because the money was not transferred yet, and the customer has a credit memo that he wants to apply this invoice for instead of a dedicated payment. So, and that is one of the key things why I wanted to fix it first. And let me see, can I break it for somebody else? These are all resellers, right? Yeah, these are all resellers. So let me do it for the first. I'm going to break the application or reverse the application. I'm going to void this payment. So now the balance is zero. And to make sure that this customer does not go into credit hold, I'm going to just apply the credit memo. In the previous demo, there were 2 lines here. Now there's 1. So here we are. I voided a payment. It shows here. What does voiding mean? It might be, for instance, that the customer sent a check and he tells me, hey, rip up that check. I've got something else. Or we did not transfer money yet. For credit card payments, you can only void a payment if we did not receive the money. In all other cases, we have to refund the payment. That's a key thing. In this case, since it's all based on that demo payment gateway, I can play around with it, and I can even when the processing status says money captured, I can still void it. But you will notice if you are playing around with it in some kind of demo environment with, let's say, with fake credit cards or test credit cards or whatever, the moment you use credit cards, you have to refund a payment instead of void a payment. And that's where the next one is, refund it. Refund means we receive the money, we give you that money back. We can also delay a payment if we want, if we do a pay in arrears, we maybe validate the credit card so we can charge for the card, but we don't accept the payment yet. We will delay that payment until the end of the month. And we can cancel a document. To be honest, I haven't done that ever. I don't see the reason, because cancel is very generic. I'd rather void it and make a note of that, or I refund it and make a note of that. Just canceling things are, for me at least, more things to do on orders than on payments, because it's not clear why it's done. So I saw a hand up just now, but I see that it's gone. So either I've made it clear or the question comes now.
Made it clear. I was going to ask you to clarify what it would be, what's voiding a payment, because since we are, not English speakers, sometimes people don't understand the meaning of the void word.
Okay, voiding a payment says it's not valid anymore. And that is the reason why with a credit card, you can not void it if the money's already there, because you have to push the money back into the account. For a check, a paper thing, right? That you write down. It's not true. It's from 20 years ago. I don't know if all of you remember those, but for a check, I can void a check because that means that, hey, I've got something in my hands that allow me to cash $20, but I'm not going to do it because the customer called me and says, hey, forget about that check. Please, I'm going to pay by credit card. So since the credit card is a online direct payment method, the moment I have received the money, I cannot say, hey, that money is, or that payment is not valid anymore because I received that money. I have the money in my bank account. So I have to send it back, which is refunded. Voiding is, hey, I've got all kinds of, I've got a check in hand here and the customer calls me and says, cancel that check. So what I have to do in that case is not only rip up the check to prevent that it's being cashed, but I also need to void the payment that is there by check or cash and wait for the customer to do an online payment or a bank transfer or whatever. Was that clear or clearer?
Yep.
Good.
Another question is, we had besides the dumb gateway, we had the cash payment.
Yeah.
That it will still be there, right? The cash payment in Odin, because it was based upon dumb gateway, I think.
No, cash payment is not based on dummy gate. So
no, oh, so it's okay.
Yeah, so that
So
one
it should be okay. Yeah.
There it is.
Okay. Thanks.
So and the one that you are looking for will be now this one. You're probably using dummy auto payment at this moment.
Yes.
But you are going to use the demo payment gateway.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. So let me walk you through a couple of those configurations. The first thing is manage payment method. So what do I want to start using? And I can select anything from this list. These payment methods are part or given in through the payment gateway scenario. I can enable or disable items here. And when it comes to payment systems, I can use whatever is here, or I can add a new one. What type is it? It is a custom. And I'm going to call this nope, let's Control AC. And I think that I have to do that. And in this case, it's a single payment method for all customers in the system. I can upload a logo. And if it's only available for resellers, you can specify that by unchecking this box. So here we are. We now have something called Claro Invoice. If I now go back to my payment methods, I can select Claro Invoice as a payment gateway. So it's that simple to do things. We do have quite good documentation on this. And eventually, if you go for that Claro Invoice payment system, we can restrict for which countries it is valid. If needed, I can put in credit card masks for the payment method itself. Let me take this one for a second. We can see for which currency it is enabled. And we can charge, like I said, that handling fee. That handling fee that might be charged to you for each transaction, you can charge the customer for it. So if I edit this, I can do a fixed fee or a percentage. So if, let's say, Stripe charges you 1% for each transaction, you can specify that you are charging 1% to that customer if needed. If you do a fixed fee, you can set whatever it is, $1, $25, whatever you want to do. So you can set that handling fee if needed. And what do you do with refunds? Do you want, if a customer says, hey, or if the customer for whatever reason is eligible for a refund, that the system does it automatically? Or do you want to have a say in that and approve some and don't approve others? And that is why this one is on manual. And you see that in this case, the demo payment gateway is the actual payment gateway that we're using. Let's go to payment gateways. We want tokenized is enabled. Do we want 3D secure? Yes or no? We can see the features, and the features are the payment system that works there and the appropriate currencies. So if I only want this payment method to support US dollars, I remove everything except for US dollars. Or I can add a new feature. For instance, Claro invoice for USD. And if we want to do pre-authorization, how much do we pre-authorize for? In most cases, it's one item of the local currency, of the currency that we're talking about. So in this case, a $1 thing. If it were euros, it would be probably €1, etc. for pre-authorization. So now we can support Claro invoice, meaning that it would be a good idea if my mouse allows me to go there. Let's go to payment processing and payment method to add Claro invoice to my list of payment methods. Let me see. Payment methods. There it is. And I can set this as default. And if this customer now places an order, let's quickly do that. Add new order or whatever service plan we have. Let's do Cloud VPS for a subscription period. 1 year. Next. Next. Admin. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Next. Too short. Okay, then we generate something, show it, good, next. And you see that the payment method in this case is now Claro invoice. So it can be that simple. Let's cancel this. I see another question. I can apply a payment to a sales order, but not for a billing order. Yes, as long as that payment. Let's use this one as an example. I've got multiple payment methods. I've got demo payment gateway. The payment method that is set for auto payments is the one that will always be used for billing orders. And that means that if I buy something, I can use any other item for just a sales order or a change order, anything that I do manually. I can select whatever I want. The thing is that the system does not have the capability to do that, to make that choice. So that means that I need to have, for billing orders, I need to have an auto payment setting, because that is the payment method that will be used for billing orders. Does that answer your question, Ana Paula?
Yes. Another thing I would like to understand. We are doing an export in a flat file for the orders. So we are
Yeah.
exporting sales orders, etc. But the thing is, when I export these things, the credit memos are not coming. So if I have some refund or something, I will not have this information, right? I'll have to export the documents too.
That might be, I don't know how that flat file is generated. It might be that in the process of creating that one, the requirement was that it was just payments and invoices and not credit and debit memos.
No, it's just orders. It's just orders.
Okay.
This is the reason why
Yeah,
I'm telling you
in
that
that
I'll be
case,
not having the credit memos and the debit memos.
yeah,
I
no,
won't have
true.
those.
Unless these are probably applied. If you have an order and you apply a credit memo to it, will you see it then? Did you
Okay,
try
so
that?
if I have a refund and then I create a billing order, will this refund be on the billing order?
Billing orders
No,
need,
right? There will be only the, yeah, there won't
yeah,
be. I'll need the documents. I'll need the documents. Okay.
yeah. What is important, if you want billing orders to automatically support the next, in the next cycle, you want the credit memo to be applied automatically, you have to, on that customer class, set auto apply credits. Otherwise, the credit memo sits there until the customer buys something and he manually applies that that credit memo.
Yeah. True. I'm more in this moment. I'm worried about my export for the flat file because our V20 flat file uses the delivery lines. So it comes, everything comes, documents and orders, information, all the information from both come because I'm going through the delivery lines, and there you have everything. But now the new flat file is from RDE, and from RDE they are extracting the orders. So the information for the credit memos and the debit memos, which are documents, is not coming in the new flat file that was developed. That's
Okay,
good.
let me quickly.
That's the thing.
Yeah, because you're using RDE now, right? So let me
Yeah.
quickly scan that. Because you're working with the provisioned orders data set, then you might want to look in the payments data set as well. So there are different data sets that are exported. The provisioned orders indeed only talks about orders and everything that's related to that one. I think that it would help if you guys implement the payments data set.
Yeah, okay. It's just that actually it's a customization made by Cloudblue. The flat file. There is a new flat file developed by Cloudblue for AMX, and it's only treating orders. And this is also, it might be also a problem with the other hubs. I don't know how they're doing it, how they're dealing with it. But the thing is, as far as I know, I need to confirm this, but we're only receiving the orders in the new flat file. Okay, it's just a heads up for myself and for anyone else that is in this meeting that did not realize that yet. I think they probably did. But anyways, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, let's continue then. Let's get to my slide deck. Invoices of a previously generated credit memo. Well, you can apply it, and of course, the moment one of the things that is gone to zero will close. If you want to automatically apply those credit memos to the next invoice, it's fairly simple. Just make sure that the auto apply credits is set, because by default that setting is set to no, which is weird, but this is how you can make sure that in the next invoice, the invoice is generated automatically, the credit memo is applied, and then the payment will be made. Another one, refund, but keep the service plan active. The customer paid by credit card. You can do standalone refunds as well. You can create refunds, create standalone refunds. I will look at that in a second. I've done this one. This is the reverse application scenario where I voided one payment and applied that invoice to the credit memo. And there is a payment issue. What do? Well, waiting for payment. If it's made by check or cash, it's always in a hold status. You have to release it. If it's a credit card payment, go into the payment details and see what the error is, why it's still in waiting for payment. So there's one thing I want you to demonstrate. I want to demonstrate you. Come on. This is the wrong one. Here we are again. Let me maximize this. Let me again go into that same account, but do it in billing this time. First one. Let me see, do we have subscriptions in here? Documents, no, nothing here. Nothing there. Nothing there, okay. So let's go to documents and use this account with all the information. If a customer, no, let's take this payment. One of the things I can do is I can void it because the money has been captured. I can break that application if I want to. And I can void it because it's a check cash payment. The moment I get credit card, and I don't think we have credit card in this one, in this scenario, maybe I have it in my other platform. Let's see. Let me go to billing, settings, payment processing. We only have check or cash. So I cannot demonstrate the refund. It's fairly simple. A refund is you go to that payment and instead of, oh, this one is already voided. Let's take that one. Instead of void, there is a refund button. It's that simple. What does refund do? It brings the money from one credit card account, the seller's, back into the customer's account. We actually give the money back. That's the whole idea of a refund. That only works for credit card payments where the money was actually transferred. That also works with bank transfer payments where the money was actually transferred. If we have a payment where the money has not been transferred, you can void it. Let me quickly fix this. I don't want to be responsible for somebody's demonstration later to go bad. I wish somebody did that with my account. Give me 1 million credit. So for the rest, what questions do you have? I see a thumbs up. Thank you, Ana Paula. For the rest, if there are no more questions, let me stop the recording and let's be back at 35 past the hour.
Yes, sir.
See you in